Welcome back to another episode of the Top Attorneys of North America podcast. Today's guest is truly unique, a seasoned business law attorney and an accomplished musician. Joining us from New Haven, Connecticut is Isaiah Cooper, an attorney with decades of experience and a professional trombonist who has performed at elite levels. Isaiah brings a rare blend of analytical precision and artistic creativity, qualities that serve him especially well in guiding business owners through some of the most important transitions of their lives. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Among the roughly 70 million baby boomers in the US, and according to a recent article in Forbes, approximately 6 million baby boomers own small and mid-sized American businesses. That's 40 to 51% of all business owners in the country. Forbes stated that they are set to be involved in a great ownership transfer by 2035 as they begin to retire, with about 1 million of them expected to be sold in transactions cumulative worth $5 trillion. So these individuals are faced with a critical question: how do I successfully exit or sell my business and maximize its value while protecting my legacy? Isaiah Cooper has been at the forefront of helping his clients navigate these high-stake decisions. Isaiah, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sal. It's a pleasure to be here and be with you and to talk about these issues.
Excellent. Let's start here. Let's let our listeners know more about you and what has led us to this point in time. You have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, summa cum laude, in trombone performance from the University of Buffalo, a Master of Music from Youngstown State University, and finally, your Juris Doctor from New York University School of Law. It's an interesting path to law school. What inspired the transition from music to you seeking your law degree and becoming an attorney?
Well, those are good questions, Sal. I studied music as an undergraduate and in graduate school, and there were at least 2 or 3 other places I studied after Youngstown that you didn't know about or didn't find out about. I was inspired to study music. First of all, I'm the youngest of 4. My closest older brother, we were in 2 sets. My eldest brother of blessed memory was born in 44, my sister in 47. And then my brother Bob was born in 53 and I was born in 55. Bob is an extraordinary keyboard player, and I was always trying to catch up to him. However, I studied music in college and he didn't. And then I started out in a music education program, a 5-year program that should have gotten me a bachelor's and a master's in music education. But I only stayed in that program for 2 years, and then I left the program and became a performance major. I stayed in the music department, but I left that particular degree path, opting to study performance. I just wanted to find out how far I could take it if I tried to find out, And I took it pretty far. After getting my master's degree in Youngstown, I spent 2 years in Memphis, Tennessee, at the university, now the University of Memphis. It was then Memphis State University, where I played. I was the first call substitute for the Memphis Symphony, Memphis Opera, Memphis Ballet, which were all the same orchestra, essentially, and did a lot of freelancing around Memphis, and then moved to Los Angeles to study at USC, which is probably, Memphis is a very interesting place and a very musical place, but it's not as great a university situation as USC was. And I studied in Los Angeles for 2 years, and I played in the Santa Monica Symphony as principal trombonist. I know I don't look Korean or Japanese, but I played in the Korean orchestra, the Japanese orchestra, the orchestra in the barrio, and I with some colleagues that who I met playing my first fall in Los Angeles. We played a series, and I did that 2 years of performance of the Nutcracker Ballet east of downtown, and I met people there with whom I formed the Concurrence. It was a avant-garde quartet, flute, trombone, vibraphone, and cello, and we after just sort of getting together and improvising a couple of times, we all decided to write something for this odd quartet, and that was it was extraordinarily fun and extraordinarily interesting. And we each wrote very different pieces, and we ended up there is a, I think KPFA. Public radio in Santa Monica, we did a live broadcast of these pieces at that time. And so it was extraordinary. And then I got a grant to study with Armin Rosin, a great trombone soloist in Germany, who is based, I think he's retired from the Musikhochschule in Stuttgart, but he was a great a great soloist in a very Germanic style, and a great teacher. And because of him, I got the job in the Jerusalem Symphony, because we in the spring of the spring of that year. I can't remember what year it was. I could figure it out in a second. But we went. He had a villa on the Mediterranean coast on the east side of Spain. We went there for a week. We did performances around there, and but during the year that I was studying with Armin Rosin, he went to Israel and did some recitals in Israel. And when he came back, he said, "You have to prepare for an audition. The music director of the Jerusalem Symphony is the conductor of the West German Radio Orchestra, and he was coming to Stuttgart to conduct the South German Radio Orchestra. And while he was there, I was able to audition for him, and got the job in the Jerusalem Symphony for the following year. So it's been a wild path.
Yes, sir.
And I never thought of myself as good with languages. I studied Russian in high school, but I had a Goethe Institute intensive German course in Freiburg before moving to Stuttgart to study with Herr Rosin, and even though I got this Goethe Institute, I still couldn't speak German. I needed to take my dictionary to the grocery store in order to figure out what was in things. But 3 or 4 months after that, all of a sudden, I went, oh, it dawned on me all of a sudden that I was thinking in German, I was dreaming in German, which was just a constant surprise, because I didn't do that well in the Russian classes I took. I did pass the New York State Regents exam in Russian, but so I moved forward, and it was a fascinating year in Germany, and then a great year playing in the Jerusalem Symphony. However, when I was in Germany, I got my mother always typed her letters to us, and I got a typed 2-page single-spaced letter from my mother in Germany. And at the beginning of my year in Israel, I got an aerogram with 2 paragraphs, double-spaced, and just about every word was misspelled, and whatever ideas were in those 2 paragraphs were jumbled up. Unfortunately, my mom was going through multi-infarct dementia, and she was brilliant, and her mental abilities were going downhill, plummeting, and that's one of the reasons I did not stay in Jerusalem, because they offered me another contract for the next year, but I decided it was time to be closer to home and to help out with figuring out where she was going to end up. So it's been a very interesting story. And then when I came back to the States, I got a job as a paralegal at a firm on Wall Street, a fantastic products liability defense firm. I knew I didn't want to do what they did, but I ended up applying to NYU Law School and getting a great education there, and then started out working extraordinarily hard at a firm in New York before moving up to Connecticut to take a different job and hopefully to have a better life than I was in New York. My work day was generally sort of 9 a.m. to 9 or 10 p.m. And I thought maybe I could have a better life if I got out of the city because I knew that was sort of the standard for important firms doing important work in New York. So I got a job in Connecticut, stayed at that firm for a couple of years, moved to a firm in Hartford. None of the firms exist anymore. Well, the firm I was at in New York came apart as various partners moved to other places. The firm in Connecticut, the firm in New Haven, merged with a firm from London, and they're still in existence. They're much, much bigger than they were a small boutique local firm when I was there, but they got much bigger. And then the firm in Hartford merged with another firm, and became much larger. And I was there for 5 years. I got enormous experience doing a lot of transactional work with them. And then I went to another firm for a couple of years before opening my own firm. It made sense. I was enjoying being my own boss, and I did quite well for a while.
Yes, sir. And just to iron out the timeline, you graduated law school in 91, correct?
91. Yeah, I went to law school in 88. I was in Israel 84 to 86. I was in LA 82 to 84 and Memphis 80 to 82. Yeah, so but it was all of it was fascinating, and I learned so much about the world, about myself. I became a much better musician. And then I got this extraordinary education at NYU Law School, which was, it's probably the best degree I have, but, and I don't regret any of the changes I made and the things I did because it has made me given me greater depth of understanding of the world than I would have had any other way. So,
Yes. Excellent. And from listening to it, it's obvious you have performed at a very high level musically. What does performing teach you about discipline and excellence? And do you think there are any parallels between performing on stage and handling high stakes legal transactions?
well, I think there is. I mean, I make that case, in some materials I've written about myself when I was trying to get various opportunities to teach at various places. I have been teaching for 20 to 30 years for the National Business Institute. I do a number of seminars for them, and I've taught on a lot of legal subjects. And it's interesting, oh God, I hate preparing for this. And at the same time, I love preparing for it because I prepare these materials and I mean, I've done a lot of transactional work in a lot of ways in the legal world, but every time I write the materials for a seminar of that sort, I deepen my understanding of them more so. I mean, it's different. Writing about it and being able to formulate it and put it into words is extraordinarily valuable. Although doing it, practicing it, and representing clients and helping them sell their businesses or buy other businesses or structure their companies, it's all extraordinarily interesting and challenging. And it develops different things. But I know that to become a great musician and to become able to play at a high level, to play in a symphony orchestra of the caliber of the Jerusalem Symphony and have played with other orchestras around the world, I had to buckle down and work extraordinarily hard. I mean, I had some great teachers as an undergraduate in graduate school who taught me how to practice, which doesn't it isn't a natural thing. I had to learn how to work on things, And that those skills and that discipline that I developed, and I didn't have any discipline before I got to college, and then I changed my ways and got very, very focused on doing well in college, and studied with the principal trombonist and the bass trombonist in the Buffalo Philharmonic. My teacher in Youngstown State University, at the time I was there, had an extraordinary brass faculty. The trumpet teacher was had students in orchestras throughout the country, and the trombone teacher was one of the top trombone teachers in universities in the United States. Unfortunately, he died much too young. I don't know, 20 years ago or so. Um, but there was great faculty there, and I learned a lot. And then I studied with good people both in Memphis and Los Angeles as well, and got extraordinary performing experience with the orchestras there, playing with a lot of orchestras and then doing avant-garde work with this quartet that I played with. It was, and writing music or creating a structure for this group the piece was partially improvisational that we did for the broadcast on KPFA. Um, you had to know what you were doing in order to be able to come up with that. And so I got a lot better as a musician through all that discipline, and that discipline carried over. And, it's interesting, when I was in law school and applying for jobs in law firms, my classmates were so anxious about the interview process, and and it was also the smartest group of people I've ever had as classmates. And um and I was not anxious about interviews at all, because I'd been through, I mean, performing as a professional musician, when you're the principal trombonist in an orchestra, you're always a soloist, and you always have to play like a soloist. And that's the responsibility in a symphony orchestra. And I still play, I play in the Civic Orchestra of New Haven. It's not a professional orchestra, but there are people in there who could be making a living playing music if they had decided to do that. Or some people who, like me, had done it at one point and were no longer doing it. So, there's the discipline that I developed in playing music carried over as I was learning everything about legal transactions, and I got this experience at these various firms I worked at before opening my own firm. I learned about a lot of different types of transactions and did a lot of different types of transactions all over Connecticut and in other locations. And, the discipline that I developed in music carried over without a doubt to what I did in law.
So interesting. I was going to ask if you were still actively performing, but you said
Well, I
yes, that you're.
perform. I perform in the Civic Orchestra, but I perform in a big band. It's interesting. The big band, we rehearse Monday mornings in Bridgeport, and I turned I turned 70 almost a year ago, and I'm on the younger end of the membership of this big band. I mean, there's a guy who's like 95 who's playing Barry sax. The leader of the band is a trumpet player who's 80. I think he's 80. The drummer is 80 or 81, and lugging a set of drums around. I mean, these guys are much more youthful. I think being musicians has led them to be more youthful than they might have otherwise been, and I think that's true for me. I think playing the trombone, my breath control, and the deep breathing you do for the trombone has led to greater general health than the average person, I think.
Yes,
So,
sir. Yeah, yes, sir.
and the
And
other, and I play in a klezmer band in addition to the big band and the orchestra.
where do you
Klezmer is,
find
is
the where do you
well,
find the time between practicing law,
the
teaching?
orchestra rehearses once a week. The big band rehearses once a week. The klezmer band rehearses several times a year, but it's a large group of mixed up players, and the guy who leads it never knows who's going to show up. Well, he has gotten people to fill out forms so he knows who will show up at any given gig, and and we play all over, and there's a grouping, and there's a core group that could play just about everything, so it's very interesting, and it's a blessing in my life to be able to do that, and I think it's good for my law clients as well.
Love it. Love it. I knew this was going to be an interesting podcast. I have a deep love of music. I'm a business owner myself. And as I did allude to in the beginning, right now we're seeing a massive wave of baby boomer business owners nearing retirement. What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, it's happening. I've been representing people selling their businesses in various guises. I have. It's interesting how you market yourself when you're. Essentially a solopreneur. I work from my home. Um, uh, and, but if someone needs to have a larger conference, I usually can borrow a conference room from the Chamber of Commerce or something like that. But there's work to be done. My contemporaries, there's a number of them owning businesses of all types. It's interesting. Sometimes people ask me what I specialize in. I don't specialize in any particular type of business, but I specialize in doing an excellent job for those people who are structuring a new company or selling an old company. I've represented at various times in my career, I've represented banks and I've represented borrowers. I've represented a venture capital firm and I've represented early stage companies who are getting funding from venture capital firms. And there's, if you're good at what you do, the economy doesn't impact, how well you do too much. Because if you've developed relationships and you've succeeded for your clients in general, they become a referral source. Sometimes they come back to you with, when I've represented like a venture capital firm, they would um, come back for successive transactions as they were acquiring or structuring different businesses or investing in different businesses. So it's just been very interesting to learn about a lot of the different businesses. I mean, the range of the types of companies and what they do is wild. I would have to think about it to come up with it. But I mean, I had a client who just one thing that pops into mind: a client who was buying a business that invested in horses and horse farms. And that was just and that was just one that I might not have run into, even though I grew up on a farm. I wasn't working with farmers up here, but it was a very interesting transaction to do. I am more interested in transactions, and I developed a referral source through my former clients and through the Chamber of Commerce and people locally. I have represented people in New York. I'm not busy with anyone from New York, not in the last few years, but you never know, because sometimes someone's looking for someone, and I get a call from someone I knew a long while ago, and they're referring someone to me. I have a great relationship with a venture capital firm that's based in Southport, Connecticut, and um, that one of the principals of that venture capital firm has sent me a number of smaller transactions. Not, I think they probably refer to larger firms for larger transactions, although there's a lot of large transactions I could handle with just a little bit of help from a paralegal or another attorney who I might bring on just to do the deal. But this my relationship with the venture capital firm has been very valuable to me, and has allowed me to know more about more types of transactions. So it's just been it's odd to be a musician attorney, although it's
Yes.
not that rare actually, because I've met a number of others who had both of those areas of expertise.
Funny. Let's give our listeners some practical advice. especially the business owners that are listening in. What are the biggest mistakes business owners make when preparing to sell their business?
Well, uh, um, the problem is that not all business owners prepare to sell their business. Most, people who are in business, often they get into business because of some oddity that happens early in their career, and they may end up staying in the same company for a long time and then acquiring the business when their boss decides to retire. And because they've been there for many years, that boss trusts them, but they may not have the breadth of experience that they need to sell that business when they want to retire. So, uh, business owners should prepare to sell their companies. And what I mean by that is that they should systemize their business to the greatest extent that they can. That means that, often if the business owner is working in the business, often they're wearing six different hats. They might do all the financials, they may have a bookkeeper who helps them with just recording things, but they don't do all of the top level stuff. Or they may help run the manufacturing floor if it's an operation that manufactures products. Um, but the more a business hires people to do the higher level responsibilities, and the less the business owner is operating in the company. If a business owner is working in the business rather than leading the business, they are more likely to have trouble selling the business because they will not have systematized the business. They will not have recorded how they do all the things they do in order to make sure that there's a way to hand that off to somebody else or to hire someone to replace themselves within the business. That's every business owner should be focused on thinking about what their role is in the business and making sure that they have hired people to replace themselves so that when they sell the business, um, the business can be sold and a buyer doesn't have to do all the jobs that the business owner is doing now, which a buyer may not have the ability to do and may not want. When they're buying a business, they're likely to want to have it as a revenue generating entity rather than being a slave to that business.
Yeah.
So.
How far in advance do you think a business owner should be beginning planning their exit strategy?
Oh, 5 years would be a minimum, I think. Although most people, don't do that and they end up not being quite prepared. And sometimes they can still, if the business is doing well enough, they may still be able to buy it if they have the right buyer who has the right sort of staff that would be able to fill in some ways. It's complicated.
Yes, sir. Are you seeing more family transfers, employee buyouts, or third party sales today?
Um, I I think it's spread. It varies depending on where you are and what you're doing or who's coming to you. To a certain extent, for each practitioner, it depends upon. I'm a solopreneur. I have my own firm. I have had people working for me. I don't currently, but if I got a big transaction, I would try and partner with some other attorney to help make it easier. But it varies. The people who are in large firms, they have clients who are used to having them do a lot of different things. And so the structure of how they get business is different. As I've moved from firm to firm, I've had to learn how to develop clients and how to secure clients and how to make sure they know what's going on or that the clients are doing what they can to make it easy to sell their businesses as they move forward. So,
Yes, sir. And to go back to something that you said earlier, you said that the business owner that wears all of the hats, they should be delegating responsibility to other individuals. They should be preparing 5 years at least 5 years, you said, in advance
Right. I
for
mean,
their.
if they can document all the different parts of the business, what's happening in the financial sector of their business, what's happening in the product development or product building, if they're building products, what's happening in sales, the more people they can hire to work in these different components of the business, the better their business will be prepared for sale when they're ready to retire.
Interesting. What legal structures or planning tools are critical to maximizing the value of a business sale? Like someone like myself, I have a small company, a handful of employees. What should I be implementing? What legal structure should I have in place?
Well, legal structure, I mean, is often, a result of how you acquired the company. If you formed the company, you
Hmm.
form it as a corporation or an LLC, or occasionally it comes out of a business trust or something like that. But so a business owner may have a structure that someone else chose for them, that they joined that company and then they stayed there long enough, but they're stuck with the structure of the company, and people don't think about changing the structure. I mean, it's interesting. My career as an attorney, the limited liability company was, when I started working as an attorney in New York City, the limited liability company, I was a tax attorney when I first started in the firm I worked at originally. And we were following, at the time, we were following the state of Connecticut, not the state of Connecticut, the state of New York and the state of California, which were in business ways some of the most important states in the country, where there was a lot of business happening. And we were following whether those states were adopting LLC statutes. They hadn't at that time yet adopted them. By the end of my first year, they both had, and it was clear that the LLC was the entity of choice for most new companies being formed at that point. But then there's a ton of, I mean, the history is that at certain point in the history of business in this country, Delaware had the best corporate statute in the country, and many of the major corporations in this country, the big automobile manufacturers and the big manufacturing firms in the country, are mainly Delaware corporations, or big chains of companies like the grocery stores, the Kroger's and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, credit card companies, right?
Right. Yeah, those are mainly large corporations formed in Delaware. They may have subsidiaries in other places, and the subsidiaries might be a different structure. Sometimes a corporation will own subsidiaries that are LLCs, and there's no problem with that. But but that's the history. Because Delaware had the best corporate statute in the country, so many corporations were formed as Delaware corporations. The truth is, there's no advantage except for the fact that investors, venture capital firms, and people who are investing in companies don't want to pay their counsel to know more than the Delaware corporate law, and sometimes other local laws for certain things. But the big corporations stay in corporations because they and their successors don't want to pay their counsel to know anything more than the Delaware law. And whatever they need to for a specific transaction. If they're acquiring a company that developed in Idaho, which happens sometimes, less frequently than New York or California, then they'll pay their counsel to learn what they do, or they'll find local counsel who can represent them there. So,
Yes, sir. One of the answers that you gave, you said that the economy doesn't really matter. Good economy, bad economy, but
if you're
how?
good.
Yes, sir. Yes, that's true. How important is timing when it comes to selling a company?
Well, in terms of timing, I think when I was in New York before I moved to Connecticut, my ex-wife and I, who are still very friendly. I had breakfast with her earlier this week. Um, but we were looking at apartments in Brooklyn when I was living there and working for a firm there. And that was when the interest rates were 14, 15% for mortgages, which
Hmm.
we haven't been at for 20 or 30 years now. Well, it's 30 years ago we probably were there. And so that made a difference. People are less likely to close on deals when the interest rates are extraordinarily high, and when the when the general economy is down, it's harder to sell and harder to find people who are willing to spend the money to acquire new firms. But the ones who are forward thinking, have put their money aside for future transactions, may get great deals when the economy is down. I
Yes.
mean, I remember when the economy was down, my brother-in-law, who was a programmer and systems design guy, he was acquiring other businesses when the economy was down because he saw the opportunities. He was thinking long term. So,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Uh, you said it yourself. You've encountered many different types of business owners at various stages through that career. Someone like myself, I do have an emotional attachment to my business. How do you help clients balance financial goals with legacy concerns?
well, you've got to make sure the client knows what they're doing, what is the most important thing to them. If they really want to provide a legacy to their children, if you want the children to take over, then you have to train them. You have to bring them up in the business and teach them how to do everything and what they need to learn in order to make sure that they can handle every part of the business. If they're going to take it over and run it, in your in your footsteps. But if you're more concerned with maximizing the value of the company when you sell it so that you can pass the funds on to your children, if that's what you mean by legacy, then you should, sell when the market is doing well, when you're going to get a better price. But there's a lot of factors that go into that, and sometimes you don't have the liberty to wait for the market to get better before you sell. If there are health challenges, people sometimes have to sell much more quickly, and there's a lot of factors that go into how a deal gets structured and when it gets closed and when it moves forward. So it's you know there is some chance involved, but if you're good at what you do, you can operate in both good and bad economies. But if you want to sell your business and you want to maximize the value of it, you want to sell in an up economy, not in a down economy. Or if you're trying to create a legacy for your kids, if they're going to take over the business, you want to train them to run the business. And if you're just going to give them the money to create a different business or to buy something else, then you definitely want to sell at the top of the market and pass the money on to them in a structure that allows them to do what they may wish to do at that time.
Yes, sir. A lot of pearls of wisdom there.
You get
For
a lot of you get more alternatives if you're planning for it than if you don't.
Yes, sir. For a business owner listening right now who is thinking about selling in the next 3 to 5 years, what's the first step they should take? Should they call you or should they do something else?
I'd be happy to have that call for sure. I'd be happy to help. I'm happy to help people who are doing that and help them if they have 3 to 5 years. They can do a lot of things about, you know, creating structures within their business which will make it more saleable, hiring key personnel to take the place. If you're very hands-on in your business, you should hire people you should figure out all the things you're doing, make a list of all the different parts of the business you're working in, and try and find key personnel to take over those jobs, so that the business will be more saleable, when you get to sale.
Yes. What separates a good exit from a great exit?
Well, I think a great exit is being prepared in advance and being lucky about when you're selling to a certain extent. It's not, it's not all in our control. The world is a complex and place, but the more you prepare in advance, the better you're going to be, no matter what the economy is doing.
Yes. If you could give one piece of advice to baby boomer entrepreneurs, what would it be?
Replace yourself. Hire the people who can do within your business what you're doing. And you want to hire them when they're young so you don't have to pay them as much, but who are trainable and good, But hiring people is a complex proposition, and you want to find really great people to replace yourself in these key roles that need to be filled in order for your business to be saleable.
Yes, sir. So I'm taking away from this preparation and making sure that if you're by yourself, document everything that you're doing,
Right.
and like you just said, find a replacement.
Right. And someone, I mean, this is self-serving, but I'm going to say it anyhow. Someone once said to me, "You always pay your attorney first." And I thought, well, I'll take that. I think but I think it's good advice, because if you don't pay your attorney, they're not going to be there when you need them. They're going to be helping someone else, not you.
Yes, sir. I think you gave our listeners a lot of great advice. And for our listeners that are interested in reaching out to you, what's your best contact number, email, website?
Right. Well, it's interesting. Email, is what I find most easily and look at the most. Although, well, let me say email. My email is icooper@cooperlaw.net. Um, my phone number, I used to have a business line. I gave that up because I wasn't getting calls on it, and it was a landline, and so I gave it up. So I only have my cell number now, and my cell number is 203-233-4547. I've had that number. I got that as a cell number when I moved from the firm in Hartford to a firm in Wilton, which was a lot of years ago. Um, so, those are the best contacts. But, I find, my men's group, we're using WhatsApp. And I think, for most people, I think learning WhatsApp and learning how to communicate using WhatsApp is extraordinarily valuable. And you can send messages to people on WhatsApp, and you can have groups that come together on WhatsApp, so my men's group can leave messages for each other on WhatsApp, and various business groups can leave messages for each other on a WhatsApp platform. So that's the technology today, which is moving to replace email and other structures that have been used in the past, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to make sure that I highlight your email, your contact information. And I have to tell you, Isaiah, this has been an incredible conversation. You've given our audience not only a roadmap for navigating business exits, but also a deeper understanding of how preparation, strategy, and the right legal guidance can truly define the outcome. And I think what really stands out is your unique perspective, combining the discipline of law with the creativity of music, bringing a level of precision and thoughtfulness that your clients clearly benefit from. And I just have to say that for those that are listening, if you are a business owner, especially part of the baby boomer generation, this is the time to start planning. And Isaiah, I really have to thank you for joining us today and sharing your insight with us.
Well, thanks, Sal. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Top Attorneys podcast. The Top Attorneys celebrates the achievements of leading attorneys across the nation. To be featured, send a message or visit www.topattorneys.us.